Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the afternoon session of our international conference. Please forgive us for the delay. We had some technical issues, which hopefully we have solved now. Zeynep, are you able to continue?
Sure. So it will be Alessandro.
So, Oliva, it's your turn. Can you turn on your microphone and go?
No.
Yes, okay.
Okay, can you hear us, dear guests?
I can hear you perfectly.
Luigi, we cannot hear you though.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Maybe
Hello?
even more closer.
Okay, I put the microphone closer. Okay,
The stage is yours.
okay. Should I share the?
Yes, you can share the screen.
Okay, I share the screen. That's perfect. And wait a minute, starting the presentation. Okay, so welcome to everybody. It's a big pleasure to be in this conference, and I thank you. I thank you to all the organizers and the university. Well, it's not easy after such a very interesting introduction. I mean, the first part based on the archaeology to shift to an architectonical, more design view of the valorization of archaeology itself and archaeological sites. My intervention is about with a very particular relation between Apollo and Mercurius. I mean, with the contemplation of archaeology and the work, the fruition of it. It's based, it's focused on the project, on the design of the of some miles of the Appian Way inside the territory of the archaeological park of ancient Appian Way, which is in Rome. Going further, you know, I think that most of you know the relevance of the Appian Way, which is really one of the earliest and strategically most important Roman roads of the ancient Republic of Rome. It connected Rome to Brindisi in a route that takes some decades, some long time to be completed. It's a very important road since the importance was attested by statues, which was a poet.
Luigi, you are muted now. We cannot hear you.
Really? I thought it was okay. I the microphone instead of this. Can you hear me now? I think there's much disturbed audio now. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, I think there's some noise in the backgrounds, but if it works, it's better like this. Okay, so going further, well, the Appian Way is quite important, it's quite relevant, since in the ancient times, in Roman times, it was considered to be the queen of roads, Regina Viarum. The road was named after the censor, after Claudius, and it was started in 312 before Christ. So it was, it is considered to be the earlier consular road of Rome. Well, the Appian Way is also important for the technique that has been used in order to make a very firm road, which is based on different levels of pavement and using very good quality of materials, especially those one for the upper part, which comes from which are the so-called basalt, that are basalt stones, very resistant. And we can say that after more than 2,000 years, they still do their work inside the place where they are maintaining them. Well, what is important in this presentation is that we actually are not dealing with something that is under discovering, but is mostly something that is new, that has been known since ever, because most of the monuments are visible and have been visible for all the time that since they've been built. The ruins are part of the landscape of Rome, and the interest on this part of the city, of the first miles starting from Rome, that were very rich in monuments, in tombs, in villas, and thermal baths, and so many infrastructure built by Romans. All this part has been under the interest of many scholars, many artists, and we can say that the story of the ancient Appia Antica, ancient Appia Way, starts for the modern times with the famous letter wrote by Raffaello Sanzio, the famous painter and architect and artist, to the Pope, claiming to start any possible activity in order to preserve, in order to protect the remainings of Roman time, because those remainings were considered like being the basis of the new style, the new Renaissance style that was born in Italy by that time. Okay,
the history of Appian Way is so long, and I go shorter and pass directly to the focus of the presentation. Well,
Sorry, Luigi. Sorry, Luigi. If you could go full screen, and moreover, because we're seeing slide number 1.
Oh, you don't see the okay.
We're still seeing slide number 1, not in full screen mode. So maybe you have to select if you have 2 screens.
Okay, what about now? What about now?
Okay.
I'm so sorry about that. You should have told me before. I thought it was okay. Okay, well, just the historical introduction. I can pass it very quickly. It's something that we mostly know in the technique of building the Appian Way and the route that goes from Rome to Brindisi and the hill of Italy, thus linking the Via Appia to Via Ignazia, and then to the actual Istanbul, to Constantinople. So it was a part of the main route that linked the most important cities of the ancient period, Mediterranean period, I mean. And well, the interest on the Appian Way, I was said to be started especially during Renaissance time, but the trip of voyagers coming from Northern Europe and aiming to discover the past of the Mediterranean, most of them started from Rome or passed through Rome, and going to the south, they passed on Appian Way. So we have many drawings, many engraves that represent the Appian Way during the last five centuries. And by the end of the 20th century, the interest on Appian Way raised a lot, because it was under a big risk of being destroyed by the building interest of private sector after the Second World War, during the reconstruction of the nation. And thanks to many intellectuals, many people of cultural interest, they tried to preserve in a new way the Appian Way, and thus obtaining many victories. The first of them was the establishing of the Appia Antica Park as a real garden area inside the urban plan of Rome in 1965, and then the creation, the institution of the Appia Antica Regional Park, which is a natural preservation park, and finally the birth of the Appia Antica Archaeological Park in 2016. Well, going back to the focus, I was saying that we cannot forget we have two different levels of archaeology on the Appian Way. I mean, there's a real archaeology of excavations, of remainings, of monuments that it has been under the interest for centuries, and also a virtual archaeology. I mean, so many drawings of famous people, like, for example, we are seeing Piranesi, that imagined how could it be, or had a fantastic visions of the Appia Antica, thus creating a sort of layers of imagination that enrich the landscape of the road. And I will start with some pictures in order to make a lighter presentation, especially after the pause for lunch. And I will show you what is now the Appia Antica and what it has maintained of the last century of its use. Especially we have a road in which Romans used it to escape for holidays, for weekends, for walking and take some air. And we can say that some parts of the Appia Antica still keep a very natural appearance, that it's very attractive, especially if we consider that it's some the best part of the Appia Antica is reachable in not more than 1 hour walking from the center, the real center of Rome. So that means that in bicycle, you can reach in a quarter of hours. And also the useful sports, for example, riding horses or bikes or whatever. And here are bikes and we use for green mobility. People like to go there and to cross the Appia Antica walking or going on bicycles. And as you see, all those uses were very had strong roots in the recent past and are still actual, like the landscape discovery, because there's a big variety of landscape all around, and the exploration, because some monuments, some places, some sites are still under this very romantic appearance of being included in the natural system. And this is, for example, this case in which we have the possibility in the real center of Rome to experience the changing of seasonality, the seasonality during the year with flowers and plants that grew next to the monuments. And also the exploitation of the areas, which in part has maintained the use since ancient time with agriculture and health passing on the Appian Way and looking like the appearance of old military forces that crosses the Appian. But military forces can be seen, for example, in cinema scenarios that by the way, the Appia is very attractive for the cinema industry, cinematographic industry, and also there are some villas on it that recall these relations, villas of directors, of famous actors, and so on and so forth. Finally, it's a road of discovery, leisure, and culture. In many sense, we trying to assess, to evaluate the actual situation of this ancient road. We cannot forget, we must keep in mind that there are some uses that we should consider, that we should put into the project in order to better them, to obtain the best results in terms of accessibility and preservation of ancient past. Well, there is a lot of plans regarding the protection of the Appia Way, which is a slice of the old Roman area, and some problems depends on, for example, the traffic, the infrastructuring, and others depend on the accessibility of sites with many modern contemporary means. Well, moving towards the project, the first thing that we did, which is very important and something that missed in the recent past, is to make a detailed survey of the site. And for that, we made some agreement with the Polytechnic of Milan, and especially with the Department of Architecture. Together with them, we made a laser scanning survey of the area, producing some different thematic representation. One of them is the geometric one, which is obviously for use for basic planning, for the first planning, and we have an environment representation with clouds of points, and also an aerophotogrammetric representation. Then we have so many sections of the stretch of the Appia, and so many details about the materials that are being preserved on the Appian Way, of the ancient materials and the new one, and the relation among them in many parts. So that we can consider that even if in those kilometers there's a lot of changing in the landscape of the Appia Antica. Well, summarizing the project, the main goal is to improve the accessibility on foot and by bicycle, especially making the journey easy and safe while ensuring the best conditions for visiting and getting to know the monuments and the landscapes and the landscape. The types of intervention focus on safeguarding and enhancing the landscape components. So moving quickly to the project, we have an analytical part that represents all the interest points in along the stretch on which we are operating, and we have, for example, some charts that represent the agricultural use, the public use, and all the parts. Then the first step in the intervention is the one that is carried on nowadays, which is the reclamation of all the ground of these miles. It's about 4 miles that we are restoring by keeping it clean and removing all the external plants and everything that can disturb the vision of the ground and the situation. Then the project start drawing some perspective about the transformation, possible transformation, putting in evidence the public areas, the one we see in dark green, in relation with the agricultural part and the private area that still don't have a specific use. So we can see that in some parts, especially in the final part, the mix between the Appia Way crossing the agricultural fields becomes very, very close to the town of Santa Maria de Melle Mole, Frattocchie, which is outside Rome. And this creates some problems. I mean, especially with the car accessibility of some parts of the road. Well, the project goes enter with what I can define a very surgical intervention. We are not making so many variation in the landscape. We are just cleaning it, putting some order in the disposition of what is not of historical evidence birth and built in that place. And I move close to the end, showing you some details of the project that is based on the repavings, some parts in order to accessibility to pedestrians or to bicycle without making a bicycle pathway itself, because it's important to leave the people the time to walk and to give the prevalence to the walkers instead of bikers. And now I will close with some render in order to imagine what should be the views of this open air museum in its final definition. So we have paths for pedestrians, and in places where we need to bring cars, there is distinction between pedestrians and accessibility to cars. And we have some sections of some parts in which we have the mix, the cross with the modern infrastructure, example given by the trains and the cars. And also we have the possibility of using some area for making some representations for transforming the same road in a scenario for theatrical, for music events, by just simply organizing the space without making big intervention. And also we have the use of some volcanic big blocks of stones that are all around the area, because the Appian Way is built on a lava bed, and some of them can be used as sitting points, and without inserting new furniture, new modern furniture, and keeping the space like this. I close just with this comparison between what we would like to be the end of the Appian Way in the ancient Appian Way, when it comes to link with the new Appian Way, which is a very trafficked road. In this place, we have made some very light intervention in order to leave the sense that we can still say nowadays of finishing of a very important road, while to opening it to its further development until Brindisi for a long stretch of more than around 600 kilometers. Well, thank you for your attention, and if there's any question, I would be glad to answer you.
Thank you, Luigi, for your contribution. We will have a question and answer at the end of the session. So now we move quickly to the following contribution, and we move completely in presence. Conti and Renato Capozzi. Federica Visconti from Naples, 1971. She is graduated in architecture in 1995, and she had the PhD in urban design in 2002 at the University of Naples. And she is an associated professor at the architectural composition at the Department of Architecture in the University of Naples, Federico II. Renato Capozzi, born in Naples in 1971. He was graduated in 1997, and he got a PhD in architectural composition at the UAV in Venice in 2005. He is currently an associate professor in Naples and a member of the board of professor of the PhD program in architecture and construction of the Sapienza University. Renato and Federica, the floor is yours.
Yes. Okay. We should screen share first.
Oh, okay.
Oh. Yes, okay. Thank you very much. When we thought of this opportunity to show you something useful for the summer school work, we thought to show a project of archaeological context as a result of a competition. So we are in Priene, it's a Greek city in the south of Italy, in Sicily, and we developed this project for the local authority for safeguard and restoration of archaeological areas. But this slide is new. We decided to
insert this slide at the beginning of our presentation yesterday. After today's looking at the archaeological heritage of our host country. And so, okay, obviously on the right is Priene, but on the left there is a very famous drawing by Fuseli. It is a drawing of the end of the 18th century, and the title of the drawing is The Desperate Artist Facing the Greatness of the Ancient Ruins. So why the artist is desperate? Because the ancient statue is fragmented, probably. But I think I like to say, I use a very often this image, I like to say that it is desperate also because the greatness of the ancient world is very difficult to reach today for us. Probably we are not able to be great as the ancient have been. And so this is a very important challenge for architects, especially when they work in archaeological context. And I think the project we decided to show today is very useful, thinking of Priene, because it's in some way the sum of intervention in order to give to an archaeological site facility for tourists, but it's also a project in order to make more clear the structure, the urban structure of the ancient city. So this is the site, you can see the sea, the landscape, the theater, and excavated the insula, and okay, you can go on. Okay, and also in this case we have the main part of the urban structure that is not more readable in the contemporary landscape. Obviously, the theater is the most important piece of this settlement. And as you can understand, it is today used in its original function. And here you can see something similar to what happened usually in the archaeological area, where different historical layers are one above the other, because there you can see the ruins of the Byzantine church. Okay, other images I would like to quicker. Are all completely deformed, but okay, it's not important. There were maps, and in this way, it's a kind of axonometry. Okay, I think it's very important. No. Okay, good.
Okay.
Vabbè, questo non mi viene adesso.
Cosa succede? Ma chi sa girare? Che cazzo?
Ok. Vedi se si vede questa, andiamo su questa direttamente. Ok. Ok. this is the situation. You can see the theater, and you can see above sketches of different buildings, one in form of a circle and some square or rectangular building. What the competition announcement asked to rebuild the existing building in the archaeological area, and because they were in some way temporary building, and they want more architectural arrangement for the antiquarium, for the services for theater, and so on. So this is a first sketch that answer the competition announcement. Building different building, exactly where the previous building were, using the same structural foundation. And this is a section in order to understand that what is really important in this context is try to understand how the building touch the soil, how the building establish relationship with the form of the ground, with the morphology of the ground. That is a lesson of the Greek word. So here we can understand better the area and what the competition asked us. The theater, you can see one of the decumani of the ancient city, Plateai, because it's Greek. And here was the area for a services building, in some way out of the archaeological area. Here, the new building in the same place where the previous building were. And then there was two other questions for the architects. One is to define some roof, some protection for the most precious part of the Insula 4. And the other one was to build a kind of path along the second decumano in order to see the archaeological excavation from a higher position. So this is the scheme, the first hypothesis. Yes, but this solution was not enough. Okay, we can see some sketches of the buildings. So this was the building for services, and we won the building for services for the theater, so changing room for actors and so on. This is a section because it is really important in that area to define the different relationship that the building can have with the soil, exactly in section. This was the idea of for the square building, starting from the higher level and then touching the soil only with a kind of foot. But this was not enough for us because okay, yes, we were able to build building more beautiful than the previous, but this solution was for us not able to change really the condition of the area. Following other flows, in the same way, the ancient would build, I'd like to build. So remembering the first image, we would like to try something able to be near the Greekness of the ancient, without any kind of fear of building a new architecture in an archaeological context. And so this is our last version of the project that Renato is going to test.
This solution tried to have just one building that tried to have different function that the competition caused. Why just one building, and why here? Because this is the main monumental axis that one of Tindari. And in this solution, we respect the competition because this building has the foundation in the same place of the previous building, and give for extension a measure to the city, 3 inches more or less, and reads in a way with its hands the rhythms of Stenovoid values. Very simple build in a way. You can see here, this is a perspective section. This is on the left is the south side. On the right is northern side. It's a building that have, in a way, it's a bridge with some pillars, big pillars, with staircase, the elevators, and inside they have some courtyard also, and antiquarium, and cover for some important mosaicos and so on. This is the idea. Have a big cross on the north side to give a measure to all the city in relationship with the big form, the big shape of the theater, and mountains, and slope mountains, and have this sequence of spaces. This is the facing to the old city. North side is the facing to the hill. It's a sort of porticos, but it's over the soil. This is a view from the city, the old city. On the right, you can see the theater. On the left, the Basilica Church. And other sketches try to understand clearly what the relationship between this building, simple linear building, a sort of stadium as a visual units in Greek, stadium. And here have this building is a big walls on the north side, but on the south side is fragmented to recognize the urban structure of the old city. Now it's disappeared. And so on. Interior, another kind of view sketch. And this is the board for competition. You can see the three interventions, four interventions, but three mainly. It's triangular shaped buildings for tourists, for information, is out of the area. You can see this azul color is a way to redraw the line of the street. Now it's disappeared. The canopy cover of the insula on the right, and the red one line is the building you can see from south, the view area of south, below the board. Okay, this is the board of competition. I show you briefly in details each building. This is the last board. This you can see services building over of the archaeological houses of the insula, and this is the antiquarium in the three view simultaneously zone. Okay. You can see here that the building is cut in the correspondency to the streets of the city, with these walls that allow to stand up the building. This is a floor, ground floor, only 5 foot on ground floor, on the ancient foundation of the previous building, no archaeology, no problem. And you can see the holes inside the building where courtyard goes. Okay. This is the main floor with the services for theater, antiquarium, courtyard, and offices for the archaeological offices. This is not bronze section, and we can try to demonstrate that this building can be built with the different modality, different technology, with structure of concrete or steel or wood and so on. This is not important for us. It's important the concept of the building. The concept of the building is put in this context a big, like the colonnade street of this city, a big building that is able to give a new measures to this landscape. Nowadays, this landscape is understand. It's impossible to understand why the city was before. The solution with steel. Okay. And this the other one is a very simple building. This is 2 diedros, 2 panels opposite to give a sort of dromos inside the wall, the head. Very simple for some conference hall and services for this. But the soil grow up and building show this corner. Very clear way to measure in a way sloping of the lake. Also for the cover of the insula. This is a sort of facade on the Tecumanos. Okay. Cover of the insula. And the possibility to view this new kind of landscape. Nowadays, it's impossible to recognize what the advanced fabric design. With this wall of stone in metallic shape is possible according to us. Okay, last one. This last one draw. In a way, I want to highlight it. For the archaeology, it needs the project. Without a project, archaeologists disappear. It's not only a problem of restoration. It's a way to understand archaeology. We have to study archaeology, to study the history, but we have to use the history. We have to use the remains. Without a project, there is no possibility to remember nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Renato. Thank you, Federica. And now it's time for the following presentation. It's from Valentina Santoro and Lucia Del Core. Ci siete online?
Yes, here we are. Can you hear me? I'm Lucia. Yes. Okay.
Valentina Santoro e Lucia Del Core sono le prossime presentazioni. So we go with them for the next presentation.
Valentina, you can hear us, right?
Yes.
Lucia.
Hello, can you hear me? I'm Lucia. Yeah, okay.
Valentina, can you speak up, please?
Yes, I am Valentina.
We cannot hear you.
Okay.
Maybe.
No, but it needs to be from there.
Yes.
Valentina Santoro.
Yes, I am. I'm here.
Okay. But it's not accessible from the
Okay, now, wait.
Okay. Now, Valentina.
Okay.
Okay.
If you want, I can start. I will talk for both.
Perfect. Lucia is perfect. Now, just 1 second that I introduce the both of you to the public.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
Next paper, this contribution is from Valentina Santoro. She gets graduated in architecture in 2009. And after the graduation, she won a national research project in Puglia, and she worked in 3D reconstruction and a digital survey using scanner units and worked about archaeological sites. Then we have Lucia Del Core. She got graduated in civil engineering in 2011 at the Polytechnic of Bari, and she is research subject is about safety protection structures. She is a PhD that she got in 2020, and she had completed the PhD in 2020, which was about the use of advanced materials in the conservative restoration.
Okay. If you want, I can share my screen. So. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Lucia Del Core, and with my colleague, we are going to share our researches in the restoration field, dealing with the enhancement and valorization of traditional construction techniques, and being part of a trend of working for years on ancient and modern stone patrimony. Anyway, before going through the presentation, we would like to thank Professor Cummings for giving us this great opportunity of discussion and knowledge sharing. Moreover, we want to thank Professor Giuseppe Fallacara of our department of the Bari Polytechnic to to have involved us in a very interesting and demanding job research dealing with the replica of a Doric capital belonging from the Priene patrimony. Anyway, this last subject will be not object of discussion today, but it is going to be faced with the techniques we will explain in our little presentation. One of the most discussed themes in the archaeological restoration field is surely concerned with the necessity to use efficient methodologies for the conservation of ancient monuments, able to ensure, we know, reversibility and preserving the original characteristics of their materials and structures. So from 10 years, we have been conducting a multidisciplinary research on anastilosis with a focus on the lithic integration. For example, as we can see in the integration of this Doric capital on the cover, we recognize the main stages with that passes from the metric survey to the design phase to final going through the integration phases. Sorry, okay. Anyway, the synthesis of this process could be the fact that an interdisciplinary approach is necessary. So this research reminds us the need to evaluate over time the validity and effectiveness of both the material and technique used. For this reason, we started from the mistakes of the past with the aim of overcoming them, and we focus then on the sustainability of anastilosis. And to achieve this goal, we use the most sophisticated digital systems such as the 3D laser scanners, CAD/CAM technologies, and CNC machines, together with the application of new smart materials, adapting them to the needs of the archaeological restoration. So we know the original intent of anastilosis is to preserve monuments in ruins, ensuring the correct repositioning of their collapsed fragments. And this technique is recommended for the conservation of old monuments. Starting with the Athens charters in 1931 and all the charters there, approve this technique, which requires mainly a new addition, mostly all legitimized by the criterion of distinguishability. This criterion led in the past to a generalized use of the reinforced concrete, considered at the time a cheap and easy to use material. Anyway, unfortunately, in a short time, these interventions generated irreversible damages, as we know, to the archaeological heritage. For example, in the post-war period, the application of concrete in the anastilosis project showed an unjustified and oversized use of iron. So today we observe a critical state of conservation, especially in the archaeological sites of the southern Italy of Sicily, where monuments are compromised by the invasive restorations with reinforced concrete carried out in the 30s, and by the more recent use of fixing glass and also synthetic fibers. And here we can see other examples of this uncontrolled use of reinforced concrete. Even recently, despite all the known damages, there is a lack of methodology, both in the management of an interdisciplinary project and in the calculation methods used for static consolidations. Starting from this lack of technology, new integration procedures have been developing in the field to replace all damages and the missing elements. In this specific case, for our research, as first sample, we choose a Doric capital from the Ennazia Forum to test a new methodology in progress concerning the anastilosis project. The capital in question is well conserved, and it just presented a vertical crack at about the middle of its axis and an incomplete abacus. Knowing so the architectural history of the work,
was a prerequisite for this type of restoration. In fact, the study of the fragment allowed us to complete a reconstructed capital and its full-scale replica, made of the same material of the ancient part by CNC machining after obviously a 3D laser scanning of the original. So also a virtual cast of the fractured surfaces was made. And after a mathematical analysis of the fragment followed using a CAD/CAM plugin program, the solid that constitutes the integration was redesigned into parts for an easier assembly then, and the design was executed from the intersection of the 3D models of the copy and the reconstruction of the original block. The capital production consists of 4 phases, 2 of which concerning the roofing phase and 2 of finishing. For each phase, before milling, the operator checks the possible results from a virtual simulation of the work, and because cutting can be carried out only perpendicularly to the rotating axis, positions the block to best give the results was required. So in about 8 hours, we made a perfect clone of the original capital. And special attention was given also to the contact borders designed to join the new to the old one part to not create problems during the assembly phase. The virtual models were then programmed into a CNC cutting machine to produce the integration elements in stone. And this is the this is the project realized. So we passed then to a more complex project. Since 2012, the team of the Polytechnic of Bari, in agreement with the archaeological park of the Valley of the Temples in Agrigento, started with a critical revision of the previous investigations on the architectural complex of the Hellenistic Roman sanctuary, which is a temple on a podium surrounded by porticos on 3 sides. In 2017, the archaeological excavations provided the first information for the anastilosis intervention. In fact, at the end of the first campaign in 2014, numerous architectural fragments emerged in the north portico of the Tiberian phase. Often, the contiguity of the fragments is an important required conditions for anastilosis, which is not so much valued as completeness anyway. In the case of the northern portico, in the phase of feasibility verification of the intervention, the assembled cornices pertinent to the crowning of the wall, in addition to showing completeness, answered to these particular conditions of contiguity. So the proposal of anastilosis starts from the fundamental principle of the reversibility of all intervention, as for the recent restorations of the Acropolis, which constitutes the methodological reference of this experimentation anyway. So it is forbidden to cut ancient fragments to facilitate the placement of new ones or to rasp ancient material. Moreover, thanks to the use of new advanced materials, the criterion of reversibility in this experimental campaign aims to a purest concept, as the possibility to bring back every single element on which we intervene to its ex-ante state, being able to take off the intervention whenever required. All the original fragments were scanned and repositioned in a 3D model. For the 3D model, a part realized as a scale maquette was extrapolated with the help of 3D rapid prototyping system. The 3D reconstruction of the portico was then useful to investigate the original building system and verifying the roof truss hypothesis, as we can see in these pictures. The porticos were made of local limestone, and all wall elements are composed of squared blocks of cut stone placed without mortar. For this reason, the use of cement and iron reinforcements was totally excluded for the anastylosis. The lithic integration were realized with the aid of advanced system of 3D survey, and for the integration material, a material from Sabucina was used, which resulted to be the most compatible with the original one. In the project proposal, the possibility to realize a congruous portion of cover was totally excluded because of the principle of the minimum intervention. So we preferred to ensure solidity between the different parts with the positioning of 2 horizontal beams of the carpentry in chestnut wood. So the relocation operations of the fragments found in a collapsed position and pertaining to the Tiberian phases of the porticos was a priority objective. Anyway, even if traditional materials are used, in the restoration work, as we can said, the introduction of new anchoring devices was observed, mainly for static reasons. In detail, to ensure an intervention respecting the characteristics of little intrusiveness and materials compatibility, the use of titanium-based non-ferrous alloys has been here explored in line with the research of the last years in the field. So proposing an experimental procedure, the realization of interconnection structural elements for reassembly the different parts consisted by using the shape memory alloys, which are materials non-ferrous, mainly non-ferrous material alloys, able to recover their original shape, mainly lost after a mechanical or thermal deformation under the effect of a thermomechanical action. These are particular alloys very sensitive to temperature. So their mechanical behavior is strictly connected to thermal environment. Their wide use in different technological fields, ranging from aerospace to biomedical application to vibration damping and the civil engineering sector, led research in the restoration field to evaluate their potential applicability in reintegration operations of fragmented artworks. The technology here developed wants to guarantee an easy restoration process and define a reassembly device fully compatible with ancient material. For the purpose, the use of shape memory alloy in this case is considered for compositional elements with secondary structural function, such as capital, cornices, friezes, or supplementary fragments of columns or architraves. So with the purpose to respect the before mentioned principles, the methodology here followed considers different steps, starting from the evidence that SMA are very sensitive to temperatures. Therefore, we started with the thermal analysis of the Agrigento side, then follow with the choice of the most suitable SMA alloy to be used based on the previous analysis and on the monument's peculiarities. Then we passed to the real experimental phase, which consists of device pre-dimensioning through a 3D modeling and a finite element analysis, and alloy thermomechanical characterization with the subsequent prototype realization and testing, and the final numerical finite element analysis for a validation of a useful analytical model and a comparison with the testing results. For a reversible restoring operation, both the peculiarities of this alloy, which are called the shape memory effect and the superelasticity properties, are intended to be used. So the prototypal device has in this phase an elementary C shape, and it is intended to be inserted between the parts to be rejoined. So the installation phases shall consist of, yes, housing creation inside the two fragments to be rejoined, a device mechanical deformation, and a reassembly phase. So we can say different cases to be where the experimentation can be applied. And here we have all the phases we mentioned before for the experimental phase. Here are some images of the testing phase for the prototype and the validation model. The experimental results fit well with the analytical model, resulted to be very useful for a pre-dimensioning phase. So in the archaeological field, concluding, we can say that the same principle typical of the architectural restoration can be considered as valid. Anyway, the vulnerability of this context requires a multidisciplinary approach. Proceeding in this direction, the preservation of the cultural content of a monument and of its historical stratification must be a priority in our consideration, in the awareness that restoration cannot avoid, but only slow down the unstoppable process of decay. And with this last consideration, I can conclude.
Well, thank you for
Yes.
being.
You can hear me? I
And answer
finish.
will be at the end of the
Okay.
session. And
Thank
now
you.
it's time for Alessandro Kamitz and Otku Panchi. So wrong, she's not here with us. And Alessandro Kamitz, he got graduated in Rome in 1999 in architecture at the Sapienza University. He has a long story of activities, research, and exploration of the world. And now he is an associate professor at the Yoseguini University. And he's here presenting his contribution with Otku Panchi. She's graduated at the Technical University, and she had a master in architectural design. She is now a PhD candidate at the architectural program of the Yoseguini University. So, Alessandro,
thank you very much. Oscar is not here in this moment. I hope she is listening to us. But what we're going to show today is one part of the results of last year's summer school in the Horea Agrippiana in Rome. Propositi qui de nostri est nova construere. Our intention is to build anew, but also to protect and enlarge the ancient. So wrote as a law Tederic the Great, an Ostrogoth, became the first king of Italy at the end of the 5th century after defeating Odoacer in Ravenna. This is the first law of restoration that we have in history, and it basically states what we're doing today. We would like to preserve the old, but also to enlarge and protect the ancient. So this idea of protecting and completing, enlarging, is what we have eventually done in our summer school program in Horea Agrippiana. Can you see it? Yes. This is the CETA, the archaeological map of the of Rome, showing with a red square where the Horea are. Does it work? It doesn't work. There you go. There. On the northwestern side of the Palatine Hill, in a place that used to be the Portus Tiberinus at the end of the Vicus Jugarius, with the intersection of the Cloaca Maxima, which is underground. One fragment of the Forma Urbis Severiana was formerly attributed to this area, hence the writing Vicus Victoria. Actually, that road climbing up on the Palatine has the same name today, but it seems that the fragment belongs to another position. Anyhow, the Horia Agrippiana, you can see it, there you go, there, in this location, and in blue, the top of the Croaca Maxima, which is underground. It is at the very edge of the Domus Tiberiana on the Palatine Hill, in an area that has been excavated by a team led by ISA, International Society for Archaeology in Rome, in the past years. This is what it looks like today in the photograph. And these are the areas that were excavated by ISA in the past years. And you see Gismondi's reconstruction of the Horia. But there's not much of that today. As you can see, columns are not standing, bays are not recognizable. There are some few walls up there, not much to understand of the original form. And that this is one, in my opinion, one topic, making the building understandable. So somebody can recognize what is there somehow. But this very building is displaying the junction between two very important directions, the Spectio Capitolina and the Spectio Palatina. Supposedly, the founder of Rome, who was making the Spectio, which basically is looking at the sky from the ground and then predicting the future upon this observation. So this observation of the sky, two of them were done in that time, one on top of the Capitoline Hill and the other one on top of the Palatine Hill, and therefore the foundation of the Roma Quadrata happened following that direction. Nevertheless, everything in the photo follows one of these two directions. The entire direction of the Republican Forum, the Basilica Julia, all the way to the Colosseum is on that red line, whereas the Palatine Hill, therefore the Domus Augustana, all the imperial palaces follow the yellow line, and the Horia is at the junction between the two. Anyhow, what I'm going to show you here is the result of a teamwork within the International Summer School 2021 in a team called Giuseppe Valadier, which was directed by me, Eugenio Guvanci, Monica Grisfo, and with students Ilenia Ricci, Nariste Breva, and Francesca Montanaro. During the summer school, which was 10 days, we worked on hand drawings. Then students did retrace archaeological plans and then documented architectural fragments and then joined a digital photogrammetric survey of some fragments and then came out with a design proposal for the Horia. In a way, what we want to do here is very different. Drawing, surveying, documentation, design in different teams. Well, we can go quickly. Hand drawings. This was a hybrid. Some students were on site, other ones were online. Then students retraced archaeological drawings from the digs done by ISA excavation in that area. ISA was exploring the levels below the Republican times, so the Etruscan layers below the Horia, where it basically found a few skeletons. These are drawings our student did from hand drawings that were drawn on site. And then documentation of the fragments, many fragments that are on the ground in the Horia Agrippiana. We counted some 20 of them, but there are many more. In that time, it was not possible to survey all of them. But we have capitals, we have columns, we have bases, and a lot of these architectural pieces that seem to belong most probably to the Horia building. It's one of the capitals, which we also adopted as our own logo. But of that fragment, we did digital photogrammetric survey, dense cloud, mesh model, texture model, and then drawings, plan section, elevation, which you can see over there. And the fragments of the temperature, fragments of the phase of the column, for all kind of these in order to have the complete documentation of those architectural fragments for the aim of recomposing them somehow in a partial anastylosis or one part of the Horia. This is the angular capital of the, these are travertine stones. Blocks are this big, quite big and heavy. Now, for those who understand Italian, the idea of image reintegration of Dominica teachings, as I mentioned, in this area, you cannot understand the Horia. So we're trying to find which implies rebuilding one part of the Horia virtually and really. So virtual reconstruction, physical reconstruction at the same time. Upon the survey of those fragments that I mentioned, we tentatively rebuilt the complete architectural order. You see it over there, the black line, placing in that overall architectural order the fragments we have available. But what about the idea of rebuilding two bays, therefore three columns, including the corner column, in order to show not the entire Horia, but at least one little piece of it. And so here you can see the placing of those blocks within the reconstruction of the original one, the corner capital, and piece of the cornice and a portion of the what is this, the tablature, the base, and so on.
It's the sound is discontinuous. Mute yourself.
Is that any better? Some of these fragments are in travertine, some of them are in different material. Eventually, the building was based on two different building materials, travertine for the most noble parts and tufa for the others. This is the corner, and nonetheless, upon this principle, moreover, one of those bays was excavated by Powell and then covered up. So it's underground there somewhere in the corner. And this is another corner base. So those two bases, the corner one and the second, are currently underground because they were excavated in the 1960s and then covered up for some reason, which I ignore. Anyhow, therefore, in order to recompose that piece of architecture, it was necessary to uncover those two bases. So the design proposal comes with the idea of digging out, it's like 40 centimeters of dirt, not much, those two bases, and therefore enlarging the excavation area. An area that was already excavated in the 1960s and 70s and covered up again. And as I mentioned, other fragments, those of the columns, the building, we documented them one by one, measuring them. As the project, where in gray you see the original fragments, and in white the ones we could not find. Therefore, something we would have to make anew using the same stone eventually. For the image integration, I have to thank Giorgio Vettini because this is which was about the virtual reconstruction of the Horia. We imagined that having that drawing of the virtual reconstruction and overimposing that both on a virtual, extended reality or augmented reality app on the phone, something you can move about like this when you're there and see it in place. And moreover, on a glass, like this example of the Haventor, would be a very simple way of integrating the missing pieces. So we have two strategies here, one virtual, the other one real, but both of them aim at the same direction, rebuilding what is not there anymore. Finally, I'm going to want to show you the design proposal, which comes from the understanding of those missing fragments and follows the principles of restoration, reversibility, compatibility, recognizability, minimum intervention, as stated by Cesare Brandi, plus the image reintegration of the rigatino alla carbonara. This Italian mix is a little bit funny, but Italians might understand why it's funny. Rigatino is that technique that is used in restoration to integrate missing pieces of paintings. And therefore, the application of that idea of restoration, of the integration of the missing part to the architectural domain cannot be done with lines of watercolor, of course. But also, rigatone alla carbonara is a dish. But sorry for that game of words. Within the workshop, we started sketching as usual, experimenting two different sides. One, on one side, the construction of 2 bays of the using the fragments that are on the floor. On the other side, the construction of a small pavilion, which would serve as a little one space for a staircase to connect to the upper level, an elevator, and I think we had a toilet, a very tiny pavilion, plus an open air area which had some shade on top, which would be new, but based upon the same rhythm of the horror. Again, a reconstruction. On one side, the anastylosis, there you go, this side. On the other side, a pavilion, which is new, built in steel, no foundations, so no underground foundations, so it's a platform distributing the load on the archaeological ground without digging underground. Nevertheless, that building takes the same rhythm, partition, order, proportions of the original. In a way, a reconstruction, but on the other way, it's also serving the purpose. The archaeological area of the Palatine Hill is 4.5 meters below the actual street level. So there's the need of connecting the contemporary city with the archaeological floor. That is achieved through a staircase and an elevator, which you see goes down to the lower level, where the one floor pavilion hosts a number of those activities. But within that pavilion, there's an open air portico, let's say, with a transparent glass, you see there in the slide, where by looking across that glass, the image of the reconstruction of the horror drawn on the glass with the stereography superimposed, and therefore people are able to understand the complete building as it was in the Republican times. Materials try to do as much as possible, try to be as much as possible sustainable. These two layers, green and dark, pale brown, in a way chromatically resemble the local vegetation and the local tufa. We used also corten steel for some details, and design in steel, so it's unmountable. Something that could be built there and tomorrow just unbolted and brought somewhere else, not a permanent architecture by technology. No worries, I'm almost finished. Not a permanent technology, permanent building by technology, but designed in a way to complete an extensible tent, which provides shadow to the space, the upper level which is also connected to the elevator staircase, going to the acts as a terrace. So from the terrace, you're able to see the Horrea from an elevation point, therefore perceiving the plan in a more complete way. But on the opposite side of this pavilion, two bays of those using the original fragments are recomposed. And in order to make this stand, a little tiny portion of architecture in steel is built behind it as a house for the excavation. The ongoing excavation in the Horrea needs a space where to put the tools, where clean the fragments and so on. And actually today they have a little box, portable box in the Horrea. So we thought that even designing that what is needed for the archaeological excavation, a little house for the tools, for the cleaning and storage, something which is designed in accordance with the context and as usually stays there maybe 10 years, even though temporary, in a way, becoming not permanent, but semi-permanent. Moreover, the entrance on the street level was conceived by reusing one of the columns that lays on the floor over there. As you can see, even this one is in steel and clad in, I forgot this was corten, I'm not sure if this was corten. Now, you see here the 3D perspective of the glass, okay, with the serigraphy and transparency of the reconstruction of the Horrea designed with perspective so that the person who is standing in the portico has the same viewpoint of the real thing, therefore overlapping that glass with the real ruin, it's possible to perceive the complete building. Yes, also this shading device was designed to be retractable in order to provide shade or not on different seasons. Very simple technology that is usually adopted in bars. But and here you can see how much this idea of the recomposition of the two bays works in the night because of the proposal, including illumination. Therefore, passing by next to the Palatine Hill, overnight you could see those two columns. Those two columns are not the entire Horrea, but in a way give an image in the mind of the visitor of what that is. In Priene, we have a similar issue. Priene is gone. We cannot rebuild Priene. No way. But we can recompose some fragments of Priene, both virtually and physically, in order to give to the visitor the idea of the greatness of the city. In this animation, you can see the path of the visitor, which is entering from the street, taking the elevator, going to the terrace, from the terrace looking at the ruins, going to the lower floor, walking in the portico, looking through the glass, and then walking all around, following the same path of the Horrea, the portico, to the area where the anastylosis is completed, and eventually depositing their tools in the box. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Yes, but I still need to do and the presentation.
Yes.
Sorry. Is this one the your maybe this one? Or no, this is not the one. But I'm not sure. No, this should be the one. This is not yours though. This is mine. This is yours. This seems to.
It's better if you close it here. Go to this PC. Okay. Now, I suppose.
No, this is ISD. It's not this one. Doesn't it's
No, it was not already.
okay.
Can you come to my PC if you like?
No worry. It's a matter of a few seconds. You said that there is something ongoing. But it's not. No.
Give it to me.
There are no doors for this
There
side.
is another one here. This is
Oh, look at it. You get it from Andrea
yes.
Pasquale. Yes, it's mine.
Shall we try in my computer?
Yes.
What do you think?
Let's make a try.
So let's mute it first.
And we will try in this computer if it works. There you go. And Patriot, which one? This one. We can turn it on. This is the one, okay. I'm going to share the screen now. Yes. So the stage is yours. You can, I mean, this is all already open. Okay. It is no presentation. This is the presentation, right? Yes. And it's working. Is it? What are you sharing? Because you need to read something. Yes. Okay, let's try this. Presenter view. There you go. Okay, you're welcome.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Sorry for the delay. Today, I will present you some experiences that I did during my research activities. As Professor Verdiani said before, I'm working with virtual reconstruction and information system for the management of architectural heritage. So my focus on this presentation is about that. First of all, I would like to talk about a project regarding the virtual reconstruction of Ciborium and Pergola of Monte Sorbo Church. Monte Sorbo Church is an ancient rural church with a Romanic architectural appearance located in Emilia-Romagna region between the valleys of Savio and Borello rivers. And the presence inside of the church of a huge number of spolian fragments says to us that probably the church changed over the time, and different fragments belongs to different historical periods. This is the reason why now we see the Ciborium that is a new one, and the current Ciborium is dated in the 1442, but it's supposed that the marble columns belongs to the oldest one that probably belongs to 8th and 9th century. And in the church, there is also a sort of exhibition of fragments already displaced in sort of reconstruction of the ancient Ciborio appearance. I did the digital acquisition of the fragments in the church, and so the post-processing phases from alignment of pictures to the textured mesh. And I identify the pieces and the fragment that probably belongs to the ancient Ciborium and the pergola. And this was made also analyzing historical documentation and ancient pictures before the latest restoration of the church. And then I try to analyze all fragments that I collect in order to create a virtual anastylosis of the both element. In this case, what I did was the analysis of fragment and hypothesis for the geometrical rules that govern them. And then I hypothesize the final appearance of these ancient pieces because I like to show the different level of information for the reconstructions. I also indicate an uncertainty gradient color scale to identify the reliability of this hypothetical redrawing of decorations. So here the final solution for the four part that compose the upper part of the Ciborium, and then for the pergola, I used as a reference the liturgical installation in the monastery dedicated to San Pantaleimon in Resi, Macedonia. And according to this situation, I hypothesize the solution for the pergola inside the Montesorbo church. Of course, I use some pieces that were there, but others are still uncertainty. So, for example, the column and the capitals, I had no idea on if they really were there or not. So this is the final solution for the Ciborio and pergola. And after that, I also use this model and uploaded it online using a web-based solution called 3D Open, that is a 3D heritage online presenters for high resolution 3D model displacement in the web. Then I move to another case study. In this case is Porta Aurea in Ravenna. Porta Aurea is an ancient gate that face the that is in the city wall of Ravenna, and some fragments of this gate are conserved at National Archaeological Museum in Ravenna. But in the wall of the city, there are still some archaeological evidence of the two round towers that were nearby this gate. So this is the timeline of the documentation that I collected during my research. So probably Porta Aurea was built on the southwest of the city wall of Ravenna with the behest of the Roman Emperor Tiberio Claudio, and it was destroyed in 1582. Was demolished. But during this life cycle, many architects such as Palladio, Sangallo, Ligorio, and an anonymous of Berlin and others went there to survey it and to analyze its proportions. So the study case, the study goes on with data collection. After the data collection, the data acquisition of historical sources and of fragments and archaeological evidences. Then moves to the data analysis and transcripts of measurement from the original survey drawing of resources that I had collected. Then I move on to the data interpretation, mixing both source-based source-based mixing information based on the source-based fragment, source-based model, and also drawings. Then I was able to complete my 3D model and do my virtual reconstruction. Regarding, as well as I did for the Monte Sorbo church marbles, also here I identify an uncertainty gradient color scale, in this case related to the reference of the virtual reconstruction of elements to the source that I used to model it. And also the interpretation of also about the interpretation of fragments and their relationship to the wall gate. Here the semantic structure of the entire 3D model and other assumption about this. Finally, another thing that I would like to say is that to do this 3D model, all these passages and all these processes were stored in a database management system. Finally, the third case study that I would like to show you is about a digital collection. Is my latest research and regards Egyptian Museum of Turin collection of 15 maquettes, wood maquettes, that now are stored in the depots of Egyptian Museum. And for this research were involved different people, many people. So the dramatic team for the digital acquisition, historians for the collection and analysis of historical documentation, and digital representation specialists that were that worked in the 3D modeling phase and the 3D publishing of these models on the web, and the data manager that collected, that was me, that collected all the data and stored them firstly in a relational database that was how can I say, interoperable with the collection management system of the Egyptian Museum. And then in this case, I will show that part in research space knowledge system that is online web database that was developed by British Museum. Here is the situation. So these maquettes are 15, but are exhibited on the museum, only 3 of them, in the room of the Elesia Temple, because this maquette represents different temples of ancient Egypt and Nubia. And the particularity of this maquette that are composed by 2 parts, so it's possible to see inside them, so to have the a comprehension of their internal structure and of the section of the building. Probably these collections show the voyage of Drovetti expedition in Egypt and Nubia, and were probably made using as a reference source some Jean-Jacques Riffaut drawings. The story of this collection is quite long, so I will pass on with this. Anyway, the assumption that they were probably attributed to Drovetti was made in a recent paper by Silvia Einaudi that noticed that the hieroglyphic drawings between the original drawings of Jean-Jacques Riffaud and the maquette were very similar. So me and my colleague Noemi Mafrici, that she's a PhD in history of architecture, went to Bibliothèque of Geneva to investigate more about the Jean-Jacques Riffaud drawings. We discovered there, of course, not discovered, but we saw there its collection of handmade drawings, and we did a comparison between his drawings and our maquette. Then we also move on analyzing the oeuvre of Jean-Jacques Riffaud, that is Voyage en Égypte et Nubie et lieux circondaires, where he systematized all his drawings regarding ancient temples, and he published it in several planches. So I analyzed the planches and the relationship between the planches and the original drawings, and the relationship between the original drawings and the model. And here we can see the maquette of the temple, the real temple, and its representation from drawing to the printed edition. Then, okay, here there is the connection. I show the connection between the database that I structured and the original one of the museum. And here the database that I developed for all the information of the research project. As you can see, for each element of the planche, I assign different attributes that, of course, because it's a relational database, is possible. This information are possible to be retrievable. After that, I move on a different concept of database. And I noticed that Egyptian Museum and its collection wasn't, how can I say, standardized with a standard. And so I move on the standardization of all information already present on the Egyptian Museum database to a new one that is was developed using a research space, and that is based on a SciDoc CRM that is a standard used in the museum sector. So this is the how can I say, the information that Egyptian Museum had about this maquette, and is a sort of mapping between the old structure of the database and the new structure of database with new classes. So SciDoc CRM also allows to do a lot of assumption using classes and properties that allow to make all the information that you put on your database retrievable. Regarding the analysis of Blanche and drawings, everything that was inside the database was mapped during using research space system that is, as you can see, a kind of visual programming language for writing databases. So you can write the databases using relationship between these small blocks. And automatically this build your database. This, I do this using also image notation for blank and so on. And so my database now is quite different and online. So is web-based and anyone that knows the username and password can work on it for interoperability of processes and management of the museum collection. Again, I use this way of work also for link information between historical documentation and drawings. And finally, there was also the part of digital acquisition made by Geomatics. All this survey campaign was standardized and encoded inside the database. And the models that we obtained were published using the 3DOP Heritage Online Presenter that allow us to create an interface to visualize the content online. I don't know why it's not working. Okay. And here the final interface. Okay, so the solution is web-based, so all online pages are available on GitHub repository. And here the final user interface of the research space knowledge system that I developed. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Caterina. Nice. Now we move to the following presentation, which is from Andrea Pasquali. So Andrea Pasquali, she graduated at the Faculty of Architecture in Florence and collaborated since then with the system of the laboratories in Florence. Now he is a PhD candidate in Florence, again at the Department of Architecture, and his main research field are about digital survey and digital representation. So up to you, Andrea, to present 20 minutes.
Cardinale. This one, right?
With the date, yeah.
This one.
Yes.
Date. Share. Would you like to have the presenter view also?
I
Anyway.
My presentation, the title is Software Processing and Digital Solution for the Valorization and of Cultural Heritage. Okay, we start from a question, how we apply the digital in project, in documentation, and in the survey of cultural heritage. Our work, we are architect and archaeologists, start from the documentation, the survey. This morning we listened various presentation or digital method applied in the survey. After that, we process with the digital stuff, and we have a final product digital who we can use in various modes. I explain a thing about the workflow of digital survey. We can organize the entire workflow in 4 parts. First part of planning, a survey on situ, data process, and the data use. This presentation work on this line, the line of between the data process and the data user. I show you some example of possibility in a workflow. The first is from the digital space, 3-dimensional space, to the 2D dimension. The sample is on the Summer School of Rome in the past year. We start from a 3D laser scanner point cloud. We produce a screenshot of that. And after that, we do the digital redrawing to have this kind of product, of final product. Another possibility is use digital photogrammetry. In this case, we apply the software reality capture. We process 350 images. And we obtain a 3D model with his texture, his color information, give us to a texture. And this is a particular of work done. With the model in the software, we can organize with the tool of cropping box some portion we use to produce a flat drawing. We organize one small crop box for the section, 1 second for the first projection of the drawing, and a last box for the thing too far of the observation plane, in general the background. This is how we produce it. The first, the second, and the background. We organize with the Photoshop these different layer with a different level of transparency to give back the deeper of the space, to read the state of art of the situ and evaluate from some of the project. Another way is apply in a digital photogrammetry. In this case, I show you a sample from the drone. Another scheme with a possibility of workflow. The important part, the important focus is the data management. The processing of file produce a 3D model and texture. At this point, a decimation, a manage of this model could be found some different way to use. In this case, virtual reality possibility, finalize or a normal user or a professional user. I show you results of this kind of workflow. This is a scheme of survey, different level of highness flight plan to arrive a point cloud obtained by alignment of photo. That one, the point cloud, the mesh warped on it, and the final result, the 3D mesh with with his texture to obtain our orthophoto elaboration. Another way, use a point cloud to digital drawing. This is a point cloud managed on Autodesk Reality Cap. We use to control, we use to understand this point cloud an elevation map created by the software. We produce the same way some slice of the model. This is the ground floor, this is elevation. This is a very short slice to observe the andament of the section. Here, the second projection, and the ground floor projection, the background. After that, we organize this data produced in different layers, and we redraw to obtain at the first the drawing, the digital drawing with orthophoto, and after only the drawing. Another example, this point cloud, we apply a normal map code from AutoCAD. In this case, we obtain the same slice. We do a virtual plot in image format. This one, the section, the first projection. In this case, we have a long space to drawing, and we insert, we add a second projection and the final projection for the background. We organize the layer to have easy work to redraw the entire object. This is the final result. We go one step on from point cloud to 3D model. In this example, we manage a laser scanner point cloud. We manage that one with a reality capture. We do a work process to obtain entire mesh. Clean the mesh by part, not interesting. The final focus of this work is obtain a simplified model of the buildings and the surveyed model of the natural system, the natural environment. We finish this work on Maxon Cinema 4D, Cinema 4D, sorry. We construct the simply element on the topology, on the morphology, we can observe in this mesh. This is a clean model. This is a final volumetric results. And after that, the rendering. Other example of that one is applied this remain of fort in Elba Island. We practice the survey, the laser scanner survey. We calculate the mesh. And we reconstruct in the same way with the Cinema 4D, the volume and the configuration of the entire object. We can read the internal part and we repropose in this model. Here, a bidimensional projection. Same workflow in other tower, defensive tower. Texturized, we can observe the result of laser scanner survey. This is the part of reconstruction. We splitted the model and conserve the natural system, the rock system. And we complete the asset with inside of the object. At finish, two different possibility of usage of digital photogrammetry. The first, in augmented reality. We apply decorative element, the process of photogrammetry, and we manage, in this case, with geometric, raindrop geometric. We control the mesh, we adjust that, and we use a toolkit to jump on augmented reality. The same digital photogrammetry in virtual reality. We do the process of in Medusa head. We manage the mesh topology with a high poly mesh and a low poly mesh and texture map associated. And we use Epic Game to Unreal Engine to manage, to organize a virtual reality. And this is a render image of the final result. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea, for that being time and allow us to go back to a more regular calendar of the agenda of the presentation. And now we start moving toward the end of this session, extremely interesting. And it's time for the presentation from Marco Canganelli and Vieri Cardinali. I think that maybe Marco, he is online, but I am going to present the both of you. And Marco is an associate professor in construction design at the Department of Architecture in Florence. He took part to various projects as a main researcher, as a coordinator in time. His main subjects are about the study of the seismic engineering and the intervention on built heritage. Vieri Cardinali he got his master degree thesis in 2017. He is a PhD in the field of seismic vulnerability. He collaborates with Marco, another professor from the Dipartimento di Architettura in Florence. And his research topics are about cultural heritage and seismic assessment in the urban context, urban environment. So, Vieri, it's up to you. Marco is online, but it's just, I think it's just following.
Cardinali?
Yeah. Welcome.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you again to the organizing committee for the invitation, also on behalf of Professor Marco Canganelli. The topic is monitoring the structural health of monuments from tradition to digital recent trends. So I'm going to show you some of our works related to the structural behavior assessment and still the structural health of monuments. And of course, I present the results of our research group. So, sorry. Okay, let's say that when we are talking about the structural health of monuments, we should also speak about the structural behavior. In fact, why we are doing this kind of research, of course, is in order to preserve the monuments. To preserve from what? From anthropic and natural risks, and to conserve them along the years. So the first thing that we have to do, of course, is to understand and control, first of all, the structural behavior of these structures. And to do that, we can, for instance, use the dynamic identification, which is the recent tool, which is particularly effective for monuments. And of course, if in the first time it allows us to define, to comprehend the structural behavior, later it still gives us possibilities regarding the structural monitoring in order to check, for instance, about the health of the buildings or about variabilities that can undergo. So, of course, when we are investigating the structural behaviors of buildings, of monuments, what we want to do is to calibrate suitable structural models in order to perform risk analysis. These models, they need to be suitable because our results needs to be right. And so to do that, we need to define, of course, the right mechanical properties of materials, and yet to comprehend the structural behavior of the existing structures, which is not always this easy. It requires a lot of different knowledges related to the historical techniques, for instance, that were used during the construction periods, but yet related to the retrofitting techniques, retrofitting interventions that could have undergone over these buildings along the years. And so to do that, of course, we execute specific knowledge paths with all the path that is well known by literature related to the historical research, the architectonical and structural survey, and still the diagnostic campaigns. When we want to perform risk analysis, of course, we have to define the mechanical properties of materials, which are a significant part, significant issue of the research. And so we have different, we can investigate the mechanical properties through different techniques, such as non-destructive techniques, minor destructive, or destructive ones. Of course, the destructive ones are the best ones from a mechanical point of view because they directly determine the mechanical parameters. But you can see that it's pretty difficult to execute this kind of analysis over monuments, since we don't want to accumulate damage to the buildings and so on. And so we have to develop other kind of researches. In this context, the dynamic identification is particularly effective as it concerns the installation of these seismometers along the height of a structure. And of course, it does not interfere with the normal use of the structures. It doesn't add additional loads. And it allows us, through the micro tremors of the noise, the traffic, the wind, and so on, to determine the modes and the frequencies of the structures. And so, frequencies, for instance, we could do a reverse engineer procedure, modeling a structural model, and then calibrating this model based on the frequencies, experimental frequencies that we have obtained. So in this case, we have to determine the mechanical parameters through this reverse procedure in order to get satisfactory results in terms of frequency modes, for instance. But you see, it's not that easy because in the example before, we were assessing a tower, which is a pretty simple element. For instance, here we were evaluating a building, an historical palace. And so, of course, there are several interventions that have occurred during the years. There are parts that they have been built during different centuries. And so also the mechanical properties, there are some variabilities inside the building. So, for instance, here I'm gonna show you a procedure that we developed with some colleagues from the Department of Architecture in order to determine a suitable structural model of cultural heritage buildings. In this case, as you can see, the procedure was based on a hierarchy process based on non-destructive techniques and minor destructive ones. We adopted the non-destructive techniques widely. We executed it widely along the building in order to initially characterize the structures, the slabs, the vaults, the masonry typologies, and so on. Later, on a limited portion, we executed minor destructive tests in order to get additional parameters and to have some quality assessment of these typologies. And so finally, thanks to the dynamic identification, we were able to execute a structural model which could be reliable, and then after the calibration, of course. So in this case, this work was executed over Palazzo Cocchi Serristori in Florence. It is probably made by Giuliano da Sangallo, and it is in Piazza Santa Croce. And of course, in order to study this building, we developed all the knowledge paths recommended by the code. So we investigated the structure, the historical evolution of the building, and all the elevation of the structure. And then we made an architectural survey and a structural survey. And of course, we executed the minor and the non-destructive campaigns, techniques. We used thermography, GPR, which is a ground penetrating radar. And yet, regarding the minor destructive tests, we executed visual inspections and drilling tests, sonic tests. And so after this, we were able to determine some kind of assessment of quality judgment of the masonry typologies and so on. And later we also executed this dynamic identification. Here you can see the seismic stations that they have been installed along the height of the structures. And these are the frequencies modes that were detected by this experimental campaign. So at the end, starting from this model, of course, calibrating the mechanical properties of the different levels and of the different masonry typologies and so on. Starting from this model, here you can see the frequencies, the error in terms of frequencies within the experimental and the frequencies obtained from the analytical model. They were around the 12%. And later calibrating it still on the basis of the knowledge path that we developed, it was possible to minimize the error and so to get a suitable model in order to execute structural and seismic analysis. So this was how we can use the dynamic identification of these new trends, which is particularly suitable for and effective for cultural heritage structures. And it also can be used, for instance, in order to check if there are if a building have occurred alterations after, for instance, a seismic event. In this case, we are in Scarperia and the Mugello area in Tuscany, where in December 2019, an earthquake occurred. It was a magnitude of 4.5. And after the main shock, it followed a series of over 300 aftershocks with minor intensities, but still with a series of earthquakes over the magnitude of 3. And after the main shock, we installed the building that we investigated was only a portion of the building, was this tower, the tower of Palazzo dei Vicari. This is Palazzo dei Vicari in Scarperia. And the installations of the seismic stations before and after the seismic sequence, for instance, here allowed us to determine that the building didn't suffer any damage since the frequencies that we got before and after the sequence were basically the same. And of course, we could also calibrate the structural model where in this case it was just a tower. We found that with a simple determining just the elastic modulus of this just one material was enough to calibrate the structure, yet defining and modeling these boundary conditions given by the adjacent structures to the tower. But still, it was something that it could be done. It allowed us to determine and to understand that the building didn't suffer any damage after the seismic sequence. And of course, I'm going to present also some research that we are carrying on right now with different colleagues. My name is not directly present here, but of course there's the name of Professor Tanganelli, so I'm talking on behalf of all the research group, and it regards the structural monitoring of Palazzo Vecchio. In fact, at least not Palazzo Vecchio, just the Torre di Arnolfo, which is this one. And of course, as we were saying, if the dynamic identification allows us to determine and comprehend the structural behavior of a building, later with a continuous monitoring, we can understand if there are alterations or something else. So in this case, these are the days of the structural monitoring that it has been executed since November of the last year, and there were just two seismic stations, one of the basement of the tower, which is in the underground, and one on top of the tower. And of course, there is a lack of some data because of problem with the GPS antenna and so on. But still, for instance, here you can see the differences in terms of frequency of the tower related to the temperatures, to the environmental temperatures of the city. And this is pretty a common behavior that has been pointed out in many structures, but it's still something that we can check through this monitoring, and which is that with the increase of the temperature, even if the material is receiving a dilatation of the material, of course, the cracks inside the masonry tends to be filled. And so the frequency is increasing, which is something it already be proved in literature, but still it has been tested for the tower of the Torre di Arnolfo in Palazzo Vecchio. And still we could have some insights related, for instance, to the wind and the effects of the wind on the spectral amplitude of the top, at the top of the tower. So, of course, these are what we are trying to do right now is to include this monitoring inside beam-based frameworks where we can provide some sort of digital twin in order to get real-time data and to use the structural health monitoring to integrate the diagnostic of alterations or possible alerts on the building. Just to conclude, I'm going to show you a work that also Professor Verdiani has followed as a co-tutor of this master thesis made at the University of Florence, where a beam, it was made a beam-based protocol to manage the cultural heritage buildings, in this case, all the ancient part of Palazzo Vecchio. And so, of course, in this model, which was pretty accurate, it was filled with all the information also regarding the knowledge path that mostly followed the same that I showed you regarding Palazzo Cocchi. And a lot of all the diagnostic campaigns was collected, but yet it would be possible to connect also the structural monitoring. And so what we wanted to do right now is to have a sort of connections within real time, within the monitoring of the tower and this digital twin, which is a beam-based one. So of course, this could be something that could have warned in case of alterations, and these are the new trends in order to check on the buildings, not only in an H-beam perspective, but still for maintenance of the buildings and facility management of cultural heritage structures. So with this, I'm going to conclude. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks to Bieri for the nice, interesting presentation. Nice to see all these monuments carried in this way. And then we move to the last presentation of this session. Then there will be the closing session from the ED for Excellence project. And it's time for Darko Reba from the Novi Sad University. Welcome, Darko. Darko Reba is an architect, and he teaches at the University of Novi Sad, the Faculty of Engineering, and the University of Kragujevac in Serbia. It's okay? Okay, more or less. He got graduated in 1995, and he has brought on his this slide is a mess. Darko has published various books, is sharing his research, and his last one is about, is centered on urban morphology from the 2016. So, Darko, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Let me just find your... Which one?
Priene.
This one. Past and future.
Yes.
Okay. Screen, past and future, share screen.
Hello everyone. This was a long day. I first of all want to thank you to Professor Kamis and all the organizers who invited me to the summer school. And I will try to be as fast as possible. And my title of my lecture is Past and Future of the Culture and Art in the Cities. And we see one of the projects, contemporary projects of Bjarke Ingels, who try to connect the different cultures in one public space. You know, this Superkill Square in Copenhagen. And I will try to discuss by myself and you how we incorporate art and culture in public spaces. This is content of presentation. We will see something in the how the culture and art was connected in the past in the public spaces. Then we analyze the open urban spaces. Then the culture and art in contemporary cities, and then we go to conclusion. And yesterday we can see that every culture in the history tried to embellish the public spaces and the houses with the arts. And this is not just to make these spaces and life in them beautiful, but to mark their cultural level and to preserve for the next generation. And this is I think, very important for us to think about how we will save our culture for the future generation. Professor from Naples said very, very nicely that can we compare the art pieces in the building construction of the cities from the past with our things. I think that we need to maybe to think how will generation after the 100, 200 or 400 years will judge our cities and our planning and architecture. And when we go back in the Roman times, in Roman Forum, we can see that this is really one magnificent place with many artistic contribution, many artistic pieces, and we know that the best artists from those times have opportunity to present their art in the public space, and this, because of that, culture of those times even today is one of the best in history. And we have many reconstruction of those spaces, and we can imagine, I always ask myself how it was in the previous times. Is it really like that? This is one of the reconstruction of the Caesar Forum in Rome. But fortunately, we have one space which is preserved almost 2,000 years, and we can see how atmosphere of this space is very unique, how the all the elements of these spaces are very artistically made. And when we compared this reconstruction and this space which exists even today in Rome, we can imagine how the public spaces were important and how art was incorporated in them. And this is the thing that we need, I think, to be very careful when we design the contemporary public spaces. And when we go to Pompeii, we see that art is incorporated in every room, even the smallest for the as bedrooms. Every wall is something like canvas for the pictures, the floors, the walls of the courtyards, especially the public spaces. And I think I think this approach to the art of the city spaces is maybe unique, is unique, but maybe is unreachable in the future. I don't know, maybe someone think differently. And when we think about the open spaces in the art, normally the Campidoglio of Michelangelo is a masterpiece, and I always ask my students, what do you think, which urban space we can call the masterpiece, and what is the masterpiece for you in urban planning? And normally they often say the Campidoglio, sometimes the other spaces, but we can see how many arts elements are incorporated in that urban space. We can analyze that for the hours, but I don't want to, because I hope that you all know this space. And even in other cultures, for example, Place Vendôme, which is ordered by Louis the Great, is represent one period in culture of France when they want to represent some order and some unity, some other things. And fortunately, this space is preserved, and it is now the area for representation of the art in many different things and pieces. And it is always interesting how to make this contrast between the old urban spaces and new artistic elements in them. And I think it is, as it say, win-win situation, because both contemporary artists and the old space are very nicely incorporated. And when we think about this column, this tower, is it artistic piece or is it technological? But anyway, it represents the achievements of these times, the end of the 19th century, and it is normally became the identity of the not only the space which is around the tower, but for the whole city of Paris with very, very wealthy culture. And we have other examples in this fly is bothering me very much. We know that this pyramid as entrance is Louvre, one of the biggest museums in the world, and this connection with the ancient culture, with the technology, with new material. We know that pyramids in Egypt are heavy structure, but his architect made the light structure, transparent structure, translucent structure, and it is again this contrast between old surroundings and completely new contemporary solution. I think this is some example that we call the masterpiece of public space. And when now we go to the Spanish culture, we saw that these bullfights, and I think that it has roots in the Roman amphitheaters and fights of gladiators with the animals, and they made public spaces for that. This Plaza Mayor, even today, is magnificent public space. It represents the culture of the time, and even the facade of the buildings can be the places for the art. And it's normally the naked woman body is always inspiration for the artist, and we can see in Plaza Mayor that they present us some artistic pieces, and contemporary artists enter in these spaces and make contribution with temporary exhibition. This is the red cloud or some fish, or we can read this as ever we want. For example, this circular grass in the square made completely different situation than before. And it is the question in which way we can use the city to express art and culture of today. And we can two areas. One, to build spaces, houses. I call them cultural institution. Every house is actually the cultural institution because it represents culture of the owners and culture of the public space. But in the standpoint from urban planning, open spaces, squares and streets are the areas for culture. And we always, when we travel, we go throughout the public space and comprehend the culture of the cities and the towns. And because of that, we travel to receive these cultural levels. And when we think about making the open spaces, I always like this concept of Professor Gale from Copenhagen. He said, we first need to think about the life, and then the space, and then the buildings which will surround the life in that space. And when we think life, what life can be in the city, it's need to be some programs. These programs are always connected with the culture, and the culture is always represented with some art. And we need to think how to represent culture and art in public spaces, then to define that spaces, to find the position, to find the scale of the spaces which will be adequately connected with the previously decided life on them, and then to think about the buildings which will surround these programs, the culture and art. And this is completely different approach than the modern urbanism which construct the spaces, and spaces between the buildings don't have the actually right purpose. And this is actually the first book of Professor Gale is the space around the buildings, which is very often unused. And this is one of the examples from Copenhagen, the North Haven and the North Port, when they kick out the vehicular traffic, life became to flourish in this space, and this color of the facades of the port is very interesting and very make very happy atmosphere for the sailors who turn back from the sea, and even for all the inhabitants. And we can express art on different things on the public space. It can be the bench, it can be the pavement, it can be the visual communication and other things. And this is the one of the interesting project in Taiwan, with one empty space of former shopping mall is transformed into one very interesting area with the water, with the different elements, and people like to use this space. And it is always only one thing which can be comprehended as a good public space, that is the presence of the people. If people using this space, it is good space, but if space is empty, we make some mistakes. And how its surrounding of these spaces look like, it is obviously very clear that urban tissue around this space is not popular, but it is one very good approach how to embellish the public space of the cities. And we work with our students this concept of urban morphology, which is urban acupuncture, which is approach that small city spaces need to be transformed as the places for socialization, and with the artistic approach to show some interesting art examples. And this is one of the stairs in the New York City, but if you look, the height of the seats are very different, and you can choose how to sit in the public space or to lie. Lay down. It is always interesting to be in some space which is constructed by wood in the very busy city. And we know this example when the Times Square was closed for vehicular traffic, people start to use this space and then to represent different artistic approaches. And we always want to teach the students that we need to design for the people, not for the vehicular traffic, and we put the vehicle traffic out from the centrals of the city. And this is I think, paradigmatic example of that. We have one professor from New York, David Shane, and he said, this is the busiest crossroad in the New York, and they put the vehicular traffic out of it, and the prices of the real estates are becoming 4 times fancier than before. It show how important are space with the people. And this is the one very interesting example in Rotterdam shore plain. This crane, this square lights in the form of crane, because Rotterdam is the biggest crane in Europe, and crane are okay. Thank you. Cranes are one of the identity of the city. Architects transform this ordinary thing for the lighting of the square in one interesting example, and you can see they are changing the angles, and everybody can put some coins in the machine, and it will change the light on the square. And this is the opera house in Oslo. Is it some iceberg in the city or the boat? But it is interesting that it is the public space connected to the water, connected to the terraces above the city, and it is very interesting approach how to connect the city with culture and with art. And this is one of the last example. This is museum quarter in Vienna, and you see this very ordinary plastic benches, but it is one of the very important element for the people inside this quarter. And these benches are changing the color, changing the order and organization, and sometimes you can make the space inside the space for the talking, for communication. And really during the spring times, it's very hard to find the empty bench to lay down to read or to spend time there. It is always interesting. And this is the final example. This is the market building in Rotterdam. I was there with Professor Mark Joubert, who was actually the leader of the team in the design office when they make the competition for this building, and they said that this is the biggest picture in the city ever made. I forgot exactly how many square meters it is, but it is very interesting when you enter this market. You feeling happy, and colors are very vivid, and this atmosphere is very, very nice, and you are surrounded by the art in all the sides of the public space. And these are the conclusion. I don't want to read, but I think that we maybe in the modern architecture and modern urbanism, we forgot to connect architecture and urban planning with the art, and our contemporary public spaces are very rarely connected with the art. And comparing it to the previous time, it was, I think, pity, and I hope that in the future we will think about that much more seriously than before. Thank you.
So thank you, Darko, for your contribution. And now we have to move to the next session, but there is maybe time for 2 questions and answer, if any. So there is any question from the public, but in the hall or online for the presenters of this session? No, don't be shy.
Online.
Online.
Where? Who is? Sorry, I have to leave. No, it's not a question. It's.
No, only people that were moving out from the conference. Oh, there are no questions. Do you have any other? No. Andrea, do you have one? No.
Give one comment.
Okay.
Technologies that can be applied to documentation, restoration, survey, conservation, people reconstruction throughout different countries, different contexts, and we are willing to export all these examples in Priene. So during these 6 days, we'll try our best to do something similar. For our own assets and for government, construction design, interior design, landscape design, legal reconstruction, historical study. So the purpose of this conference was to get the state of the art as much as possible within those restrictions related to heritage and cultural areas, and with a strong collaboration between architects, designers, and archaeologists. And this is why we're here, to enhance that collaboration in the specific context. And elsewhere. And there's a raised hand from the public. If you want to question.
Oh, you're welcome.
Maybe can you like this?
Yes, no.
Online people may
Thank you so much. I am so sorry I couldn't know your name, but Professor lady's name?
Elisabetta.
Elizabeth.
Kim, Hans. Federica.
Federica, I am so sorry. You stated that the ancient engineering or architecture is not easy to reach as a level. Why would you say so, or why are we supposed to think or accept this? Is it just practice they have, education, or aliens, Why would you say that? It's correct. Thank you.
Now you can come here also.
Well, okay. It is in some way a rhetoric affirmation. I believe that we should be great as the ancients. We have the possibility to be great as the ancients. But sometimes, for example, in Italy, I don't know, in other places, there is a kind of fear. We think we cannot risk to do something wrong, but very often the thought is that we don't know nothing. We don't know anything in fragile context.
Not to touch is sometimes better.
What it is, but usually when I talk to the students about this subject, I compare the image of the disparate artist with another image that is a contemporary sculpture of an artist, but it's not important. It is the representation of a very famous aphorism by Bernardo de Chartres that is as
Standing on the shoulder of giants.
yeah, standing on the shoulder of giants. And I said, the giant is our history. And if we really try to knowledge all our long history, always if we are small men in the contemporary age, we can use the history, stay on the shoulder of the giants, and so look more and understand more. But I absolutely believe that we can reach, yes, or we, I don't know if we can, but we have to try.
Thank you. Thank you for elaborating.
So, it's time to give space to the.
Any other question from Zoom? Yes?
Nothing? Oh, yes, great.
My question is also to I think the digital survey of those things, that's really interesting. What do you think about the future? Because I think one of the slides it says things that goes in the process, and then at the end we put some icon on the future. So what do you mean by putting some icon on the future? Because future is we saw now the verse, and there are so many things that's going on. Other than the heritage, saving the heritage, would it be possible to elaborate to us on how to use these new technologies in our slides and not Thank you. In my opinion, the fundamental step we have to do is integrate in our workflow the trading world. Now we use trading to elaborate dimensional only that we study the project on dimensional elaboration. Now we have to do one step and use the 3D world, the virtual reality to evaluate the integration of the project in the cultural heritage, the metaverse researchers, so many people, and it's good to have a feedback of our shows. But now, in my opinion, we have to evolve our method to start the project, the design, and use this model without obtain to create open data archive for all research. I mean, there's current research going on. We think that there's current research going on this topic that transformation of original data or the data that we already have to something continuous. Let's say digital registration sector or digital, tools for later stages. For example, I was thinking maybe in architect in Europe or in public life and access a ready model on an open source in somewhere else in the world, the heritage. So, is there something else that you come across these days? I was just wondering. Yes, I think as an ongoing projects in such a way. I was just wondering if the common idea of this kind of project is fine, but I try to study the best way to process and develop data. For that, is index.
So I have one small thing on why. It is that there is a small issue about a gap that is between the data processing and the completion of a model. Because the problem is that we have an idea about the model, the organization, the aspect, the continuity of certain elements that are strictly in the language of the app. And instead, most of the time, architects does not use programming, or they don't write the program they use. If they are used, what happens that on the other side, who wrote the program? They have a lot of problems at the level of academic or research, needed to develop original content. What happens? That we have on one side all the data gathered. They are data from agencies, from brands that are proprietary. They are the owner of that kind of data. So you have a data that are, for example, the LCP format is from Apple. So it's not an open format. If you do go and see Cyclone from Leica, create previously in format and now will be folder or the same for file. They are never open format. So what happens that if they go writing solution for this kind of processing, they have on one side the problem that they are product from a specific owner. So they are not able to open the content and treat the data. And at the same time, they develop something that treat the existing data is not that original in the end. So the research is a risk of not being found. So this gap is not new. These are things in the past, we say 15 years. But little by little, something is ongoing. For example, the renewal is a step forward all at once, changing a lot. Now it is possible to imagine that in the next years, I don't want to say 5 or 10 or more, there can be something that changes the post-processing of the data, because a lot of elements that add something to the processing easily will create the condition that you can pass from the point to something that is more structured, like processing, the recognition of the color, discretization, and simplification that is going to go toward a request. That is, we need film models. And the simplification takes time or require an extreme reduction of the details. So we want something that works better and more automatic and give you a model that is optimized in a short time. That will make a lot of work, but it will take time because there are a lot of problems that are on one side linked to the kind of data, on the other on the way we interpret the model we see, but it's something that is ongoing, something that will be instead a new one quite soon. Right now, able, but it's too much expensive for most of the people, is the automatization of the scanning. Like the recent in October, like out the bot with the from Boston Dynamics with the London scanner unit on the back, and you say, okay, you go and you take the survey by yourself of analysis. That the battery you have to go. You go. Or there is the drone that applies by yourself, but you take the survey of the data. You have a software that organizes the caves, obstacles, and the work. Obviously, they are reducing the complexity of certain operation at the same time. Result the fact that we work on the data and producing the end intelligent economy. Otherwise, you just collect a large amount of data. On one side, the various issues connected to the informatics process. Little by little, it became even more complete, and the implementation of the process, and then also the fundamental factors that come from archaeology, and so on, that is how to use this data in intelligent way. We have seen a lot of examples that take this data using their own field or their own task or purpose or aims, and in the end, they make sense. And they give a contribution also to the theoretical thinking because they can create the digital layers that overlap now.
So, sure. So it's a matter of accessing the data, not collecting or, I mean, in the end, it's
not a massive collection of data that we make the difference unless you know, there are a lot of possibility. Data, you have a domain, and you have the massive data. Two ways, we go there and check. Then why the information that it goes going to get this kind of information and this data somehow. The original survey they can make it 10 years before totally lost. Recollect the second time, but that is a bit abstract.
Okay, thank you very much. We come now to the final event, the dissemination event of an Erasmus Plus project, which is called E for Excellence, standing for immersive design and new digital competencies for the rehabilitation and valorization of heritage. We're going to have two, so I'm the chair, the co-chair is also Guvanci, who is not here right now, unfortunately. But we're going to have two speakers, Zeynep Chainali and Boris Zed. Zeynep Chainali is here, and Boris Zed is online. Zeynep is head of the department, assistant professor at Uzagi University, and head of the Department of Interior Design and Environmental Design. And she is going to explain the details of this Erasmus Plus project. And Boris Zed, who is director of the Virtual Reality Lab at Uzagi University, is going to give us a demonstration of the application of virtual reality within a heritage context. I think he is going to work with Cora Church. So without further ado, I'm gonna give the floor to Zeynep Chaynali.
I turned my microphone on now. I hope there is no problem on with the online section. So I'm going to talk about our project, Erasmus Plus project, titled Immersive Design and New Digital Competences for the Rehabilitation and Valorization of the Built Heritage, acronym ID4X. This is an Erasmus Plus project, and I'm going to mention that this is our partners, and here you see, as this is an Erasmus Plus project, we have a website which you can also scan from this QR code. So I would like to mention our partners. So the head of our project is the Faculty of Civil Engineering, Warsaw University of Technology, and from Italy, Center for Vocational and Education Training Center is another partner. From Ireland, Association of Building Surveyors and Construction Experts, and from Portugal, the University of Madeira, Özyeğin University from Turkey, this is us, and Polish Association of Building Managers, and finally More, a digital technology company from Italy. So this is the construction of our partners. Sorry? And then also, I'm sorry, University of Ferrara from Italy again. Okay, sorry about that. So I would like to explain very briefly ID4X in a nutshell, as we call it. So it's a project intends to digitalize and modernize the construction sector by updating skills and competencies through an inclusive approach to the built heritage intervention, by the utilization of new digital technologies and the combination of, which I made it bold, is the key point, as the key enabling technologies, virtual reality, immersive interactive experience, and advanced 3D modeling. You will be seeing on the site several images that our group, not only us, the whole partners provided for this, for the creation of this project. This is a digitalization of Göbekli Tepe you see here. The specific objectives of these projects vary, but very briefly, obviously, upgrading and innovating existing training programs with up-to-date immersive design methods and tools for the built heritage inventions with both virtual and dimensional environments and time-based narrative and story space, which is very important in order to include not only the timeline, but the space itself to the dissemination of these immersive technologies and the end product. Also improving the effectiveness of teaching and learning, which we care about very much, and we see it as a part of this immersive technologies to be useful for the larger crowds, for the larger good of use of people, and which would happen through the application of an inclusive, immersive design approach to the project. Also, increasing the synergetic use of up-to-date technologies in an integrated way. So integration is also a key point of our partnership, with a teamwork approach and personal development, obviously. And also increasing the cooperation among educational institutions and enterprises in the EU for better employability, which is more or less one of the general issues that Erasmus Plus project support. So this is the image you see is a VR experience in Cora, and previously you have seen a summer school analysis image. So there are four international outputs that we are planning to work on. We already completed the first intellectual output. Sorry, I'm a bit overwhelmed. So we already finished with the intellectual output 1 in the timeline of our project, which was the comparative research on VR technologies applications for the rehabilitation and valorization of the built heritage, which I will briefly mention in a second. And currently we are working on the intellectual output 2, training modules for immersive design experts. We will be having our second meeting in Madeira in September. And then we will continue with intellectual output 3, digital training toolkits for immersive design experts. And finally, we will conclude the project with the intellectual output 4, which is the report on pilot actions for immersive design experts. You see another two images, the intervention during one of our summer schools. So also there are common expected impacts, including the European Union funding and our project. So increased digital skills, like transversal and technical skills, especially directed to construction, which we also include the design also as our topic underlines. By that, we are going to apply the BIM immersive design techniques, 3D models production, and also managing rehabilitation, recovery, valorization, and conservation of process of existing building heritage and cultural heritage will fall under this topic. Then, innovative teaching and training approaches, methods, and spread multi-stakeholder collaboration is the very logic of Erasmus Plus project, actually. And so the joint collaborative issue is underlined here, and the creation of the extended network on building rehabilitation is one of the key points of these expected impacts afterwards. And lastly, I believe, yes, open source cooperative research and training sets, which maybe is connected with the question of Luai, the last question, is it going to be an open source? So this is one of the issues of the Erasmus Plus project, this Erasmus Plus project, that can be used by a very large number of indirect beneficiaries. So public stakeholders would be able to use a methodology for designing local policies on employment and skills acquirement, innovation in the building and construction sectors. So very briefly, because my colleague will continue in the end, we did, as I mentioned, we did comparative research among all these partners. We gathered together several successful case studies in the field of application of new immersive techniques, including 3D modeling, immersive design, VR, rehabilitation, conservation, again, valorization of existing building heritage. And we collected the educational best practices focused on the use of immersive techniques and tools. But today I'm going to share with you very briefly what we have brought to the table. I mean, what our Özyeğin University's case studies were. So the first one was Kora Church immersive experience in Istanbul. You can reach the video presentation of each case study by scanning these QR codes that you will be seeing. This is the second case study that we had. It's Galata waterfront, city walls and urban tissues. It was an international workshop that we gathered and worked on the Galata waterfront. And also the third case study we had was a documentation, an immersive replica of Göbekli Tepe via digital photogrammetry, which you can find extended again information by scanning this QR code. which includes the gaming and virtual reality gaming aspect of Göbekli Tepe as well. And another case study was the International Architecture and Archaeology Summer Schools, as from time to time mentioned throughout this conference as well. And finally, we had the documentation preservation of Panagia Paramithia Church, which I will be sharing with you a small portion of the video, because this project has also recently been funded internationally again. So let me stop sharing then. I will share the whole video. I don't know why it didn't. Maybe let me try this. Yes. But I believe I didn't share the sound again, right? Okay. Okay, just wait. Spoiler alert.
Hello, my name is Zeynep Ceylanlı. I'm an interior architect and architectural historian. I work as an assistant professor in Özyeğin University Department of Interior Architecture and Environmental Design in Istanbul, Turkey. The case study I'm going to present is called Documentation and Preservation of Panagia Paramithia Church in Istanbul.
But it's
the aim of this project is to restore the church and its annexes and bring the site back to life in connection with the local community. The placement of a new roof over made accessible to a wider community.
No, it's quite slow.
The
It's not
project
very healthy,
includes
though.
an educational experimental application for design studios at Özyeğin University,
at least you have an idea of
including
where
the
it
third-year
is
architectural
located?
design studio
Even that,
and
sorry.
fourth-year interior architecture.
Sorry that the connection doesn't allow me to share the video more with you, but you can just scan this QR code and watch the whole video. It's about 5 minutes of video. So now, Bora, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Is it there as well? Wait.
Yes.
Wait. So, my right, Bora, are you going to talk about Kora Church, right?
Correct, Zeynep. I will talk about Kora Church.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to stop sharing.
So shall I?
Yes, I'm going to stop sharing and give the floor to you.
Thank you. So I will share my own screen with you now. So yes, let me start by pressing play here. So no, this is not the right. Sorry. Play from current slides. There you go. Okay. As we have already mentioned, I'm the head of the Özyeğin VR lab, and we have a VR lab in Özyeğin University, which in collaboration with the Drum Lab, we've been working on virtual reality already for a couple of years. I'm also giving classes about virtual reality and immersive design since 3 years, and we do a lot of work considering photogrammetry, especially creating 3D models and putting them into virtual reality. We've also written some articles. We have some academic publications about how to teach virtual reality itself. I mean, how you do virtual reality, but of course, the Erasmus Plus project we are working on right now is another thing, is how can we teach via virtual reality? So when we are in virtual reality, especially cultural heritage and design. Yes, there have been two projects which I've really enjoyed working in. First of all, the first one is the Church of Kora. It's in Fatih, Istanbul, again in collaboration with the Drum Lab. And then the Panagia Paramitia church in Fener, the Orthodox church in Fener, which the roof has burnt down. And we just had a big opportunity to get a fund from US Ambassador's Fund. And for this, we actually used the laser survey. So here, actually, I want to go deeper into Church of Kora and the photographic survey we did for virtual reality. First of all, I would like to give some information about Kora. Monastery was built, the Kora monastery was built in the 6th century, and then it was renovated in the 10th, 11th century. With the conquest of the Turks, it has actually been converted into a mosque. And following that, with the coming of the Republic of Turkey, it was converted into a museum. And nowadays, the government has made it into a mosque again. It's a Byzantine church. That's, of course, the most important thing. By chance, our colleague Elias Tarantopoulos has written a very nice book about it, a digital book about it, and he already had experience going there, having relationships with the Ministry of Culture and Tourism, and this allowed us to go there and do some photogrammetric surveys. Here you have a 3D model of the nose chamber of Kora, Church of Kora. It's a screenshot from Blender, the 3D modeling software. But how did we achieve this? Probably you are all aware of the photogrammetry technique. We used the program called Reality Capture, which I am very happy to have learned via Professor Alexandro Camis. And actually, it's a very good method to transfer these 3D models into virtual reality because photorealism is at its height. And basically, it's about taking lots of photographs, scanning photographs of the same object or environment, throwing those into the reality capture software and creating a 3D model of it. It's much more easier compared to creating a 3D model from zero. So here you have two visuals. One of them is a ZBrush screenshot, the one on the left. It's a 3D model of the Kora Church. And on the right, you have a texture map of the Kora Church nose chamber. In total, we did 3 visits to the area, and we had taken 1,789 photographs. We used, as I said, reality capture to create the 3D model. Following that, we used Unity, the Unity game engine, to make it navigational in virtual reality. Of course, the activities are as follows, and our workflow was like, we had to first go and get the permissions to capture the building, do photogrammetric surveys on the site, the creation of the site's 3D model using the reality capture software, following that optimization and retopolization of the model using ZBrush, and then using Unity, the game engine Unity, to create a virtual reality world where visitors can experience the detailed heritage. This can be used for both education and exhibition. Here we have a visual of our final experience. And then I would like to show you a video where actually I am using virtual reality and going around in the Kora Church. That's why I'm stopping sharing now. I'm going to share another visual. Moment, please. Probably here. Yes. So, do you have visual at the moment? You must be seeing. Okay. Thank you, Zeynep. Here you can see the experience whilst I'm experiencing it actually. So I have the virtual reality glasses on my face, on my eyes, and I'm looking around the Cora Church. This is the 3D model that we were able to create, the nose chamber. And I'm actually moving a bit slow here when I did the capturing, the video capturing, because when you're inside of it and you move your head normally, from outside it looks very, very fast. So I'm being very careful, moving my head around extremely slowly. So do not forget, this is a complete 3D model and it's not a photograph, a 360 photograph. Right now I am actually teleporting myself to another location in that 3D model. And normally with 360 photographs or experiences, that is not possible. So I teleported myself into the front of the mosaics. And I'm gazing to the mosaics right now. We were extremely happy with the results of this 3D model. The most beautiful thing is that it's extremely photorealistic. And it gives the feeling of being there almost the same. So this actually opened our mind, considering how to use virtual reality together with cultural heritage. And following that, we had the opportunity to get into this Erasmus Plus project, where we are actually discussing how we can teach cultural heritage using virtual reality. In this case, we would be there together, a teacher and a couple of students experiencing a photogrammetric model, for instance, and then drawing something on top of it, etc. For this, we are currently doing research, and we have been to Ferrara recently with Professor Camus and discussed certain methods. And we are on our way to create a training module for educational purposes. And the sector, the construction sector, so people can work from different locations on material like this. And that's it. I'm stopping the video now. Let me go back to the other. Yeah. So I hope that was enough. I can also continue explaining what sort of programs we are considering, but that's not in my responsibility, right? So, okay, Zeynep, thank you so much. I'm stopping my sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And we go now to the conclusions. The dissemination of the products is finished, and I would like to invite here Professor Hakan Mert and Numan for the conclusion remarks, if you would like to. Thank you very much. It was a long day, but it was very
contribution. As you see, the Priene is a very important opportunity for ancient architecture. Really, I have a question. I have a problem between architecture of past and architecture of today. I have a question for Darko after his contribution, but we can discuss later at dinner or tomorrow. So, I hope we can continue to earlier this summer school, and we have many objects in Priene and around Priene. I must say about another church in Galevec, St. Nicholas Church. We can go there and we can look at it with you. I would like to thank all contribution of the organized committee, especially in Monday, Alessandro. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alessandro, thank you, Leo, and thank you so much for all the information you have shared today. For agency part, maybe maybe we couldn't contribute too much because it's not really our expertise, but we have learned a lot. And the most important thing is we were able to see how accurate was our decision for this organizing or contributing to organization of this event, this summer school. Start was very intense and strong, which shows that it will be a proper content creating event for us, for especially contents that we need for our fundings in ancient sites. So I would like to thank each one of you and all for all your contributions. And we will be around you on the field as well. Please let us know any single thing you need. And thank you so much for being here. And it's a perfect start, this collaboration. Thank you.
Then we would like to thank all our distinguished guests for the concluding remarks as well. So this is the end of our symposium conference today.
Can you illuminate us what happens next?
No.
Yeah.
No. Well, yes, we have we especially you all. I assume quite hungry. Now we are going to eat a special dish called chopshish. It's a kebab, basically, but it's very famous around here. So we will take our bus and then go to eat.
Shall we stop recording?
We can take it.
Grazie. Nice to meet you.
Thank you so much.